Hello everyone, enjoy today's episode of Genesis of Lands. Watch, learn, and listen. And don't forget to subscribe. Ciao, ciao.
There's a city in Florida where cobblestone streets wind past buildings older than the United States itself, where a massive stone fort has stood for over 300 years, never once defeated in battle, where pirates once attacked, where escaped slaves found freedom, and where the very first Thanksgiving in America actually happened, 55 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. This is St. Augustine, founded in 1565. That's 459 years ago, before there was a United States, before English colonists built Jamestown, before the Mayflower sailed. St. Augustine was already here, already thriving, already writing its chapter in American history. But here's the coolest part. St. Augustine wasn't built by English colonists. It was built by Spanish explorers. And the fort they built? It's made from magical stone that catches cannonballs instead of breaking apart. So how did America's oldest city end up in Florida? And why did a Spanish explorer decide to build it there all those centuries ago? Let's go way back to the year 1513. A Spanish explorer named Juan Ponce de Leon was sailing near the Caribbean islands when he spotted a new land covered in flowers. He had discovered Florida. He named it La Florida, which means full of flowers in Spanish. He claimed this whole peninsula for Spain. But Ponce de Leon didn't build any cities. He just explored and sailed away. For the next 50 years, Florida stayed pretty empty of European settlers. The Native American people called the Timucua had lived there for thousands of years, fishing, farming, and living peacefully in villages along the coast. Then something happened that changed everything. In 1564, French settlers started building a fort in northern Florida called Fort Caroline. The King of Spain, Philip II, got really worried. What? Because Spanish ships carrying gold and treasure from South America and Mexico had to sail right past Florida's coast on their way back to Spain. If French pirates captured those ships, Spain would lose all that treasure. So King Philip decided to send someone tough and smart to Florida. Someone who could build a city, protect the treasure ships, and kick out the French. He chose a man named Pedro Menendez de Aviles. Pedro Menendez was born in Spain in 1519. When he was just 14 years old, he ran away from home to become a sailor. He loved adventure in the sea. Over the years, he became one of Spain's best admirals. That's like a captain of many ships. He fought pirates. He organized treasure fleets. The king trusted him completely. In July 1565, Pedro Menendez set sail from Spain with 11 ships and about 2,000 people. Soldiers, sailors, their families, and even some priests. It was a huge expedition. They sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, which took many weeks. Finally, on August 28, 1565, they spotted the coast of Florida. August 28th happened to be a special religious day in Spain, the feast day of St. Augustine. St. Augustine was a famous Christian teacher who lived a long time ago. Because they saw land on his special day, Menendez decided that's what he would name the new settlement, St. Augustine. On September 8, 1565, Menendez and his people landed on the shore near a Timucua village. The chief of that village was named Seloy, and he lived in a place the Timucua called Seloy. The Timucua were curious about these Spanish visitors in their strange clothes and metal armor, riding in huge wooden ships. Menendez did something smart. Instead of fighting, he was friendly. He shared a meal with the Timucua people. They sat together, ate food, and talked, even though they spoke different languages and had to use hand signals. Some historians believe this was actually the first Thanksgiving in what would become the United States. After the meal, Menendez and his soldiers started building. They needed shelter fast. The Timucua let them use some of their village buildings. The Spanish also started building a wooden fort for protection. Remember, they still needed to deal with those French settlers to the north. A few weeks later, Menendez led his soldiers north and attacked Fort Caroline. He captured it. The French were driven out and Spain now controlled Florida. But Menendez knew wooden forts weren't strong enough. One spark and the whole fort could burn down. Pirates or enemies could destroy them easily. St. Augustine needed something stronger. For the next 100 years, St. Augustine survived with wooden forts. But in 1668, something terrible happened. An English pirate named Robert Searles attacked St. Augustine and burned most of the town to the ground. The wooden fort couldn't protect the people. The Spanish governor sent an urgent message to the Queen of Spain. "We need to build a stone fort or we'll keep losing this city." The Queen agreed. In 1672, construction began on what would become the most famous building in St. Augustine, the Castillo de San Marcos. Now here's where it gets really interesting. To build a stone fort, you need stone, right? But there were no mountains near St. Augustine. No rocks. No granite. What could they use? Then someone discovered something amazing on nearby Anastasia Island. There was a type of rock called coquina. Coquina is a Spanish word meaning tiny shell. This rock was made from thousands and thousands of tiny seashells that had piled up over millions of years and stuck together. The rainwater dissolved part of the shells and acted like glue, cementing them into soft, porous rock. Workers quarried huge blocks of coquina from Anastasia Island. They loaded them onto boats and ferried them across the water to the construction site. Native Americans from nearby Spanish missions did most of the hard labor, along with skilled workers brought from Havana, Cuba. Building the Castillo de San Marcos took 23 years, from 1672 to 1695. Imagine working on one building for your whole childhood. The workers carefully cut and stacked over 400,000 blocks of coquina by hand. They built walls that were 12 to 14 feet thick. That's as wide as a small room. The walls stood 22 feet tall at first, and later were raised to 35 feet. The fort was shaped like a star with four pointed corners called bastions. This special design meant soldiers inside could see every angle around the fort. No enemies could sneak up and hide. The fort also had a moat, a water-filled ditch all around it, for extra protection. And here's a cool fact. The Spanish dug up all the dirt from the moat and piled it into hills around the outside of the fort. These man-made hills, called glacis, would absorb or deflect cannonballs before they could hit the fort walls. But the real magic was the coquina stone itself. When the fort was finally tested in battle in 1702, everyone discovered something incredible. British cannons fired at the fort for weeks. But the coquina didn't shatter like regular stone or brick would. Instead, it absorbed the cannonballs. The soft, porous shells would compress and catch the cannonballs like a sponge catches water. The cannonballs would stick in the walls instead of breaking through. When the British saw their cannonballs getting stuck in the walls, they were amazed and frustrated. One British soldier wrote that attacking this fort was useless. The Spanish would just patch up any holes with more coquina, and the fort was good as new. The Castillo de San Marcos was attacked and besieged multiple times throughout history. In 1702, British forces under Governor James Moore attacked but failed to capture it. In 1728, another British attack failed. In 1740, British General James Oglethorpe laid siege to the fort for 27 days but gave up. The fort was never conquered in battle. Not once in over 300 years. That's how amazing that coquina stone was. Inside the Castillo there were many rooms called casemates. These were like storage rooms and barracks where soldiers could stay safe during attacks. The casemates had thick, arched ceilings to protect against bombs. They stored gunpowder, cannonballs, up to 20,000 of them, food and supplies. On top of the fort was the gun deck, a big open courtyard where Spanish soldiers positioned cannons. From up there, you can see for miles in every direction. The cannons could fire cannonballs as far as 3.5 miles away, protecting all approaches to St. Augustine. Now here's something really special about St. Augustine during Spanish times. It became a place of freedom for escaped slaves. In the British colonies to the north, like Georgia and South Carolina, many black people were enslaved. But if they could escape and make the dangerous journey south to Spanish Florida, the Spanish governor would grant them freedom. There was only one rule. They had to declare loyalty to the King of Spain and convert to Catholicism. Most escaped slaves gladly agreed. In 1738, the Spanish established a settlement just north of St. Augustine called Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mos, or Fort Mose for short. This was the first legally sanctioned free black settlement in what is now the United States. The free black men were also recruited into the Spanish militia and given muskets to help defend St. Augustine. They fought enthusiastically, especially against their former British owners who tried to attack the city. St. Augustine's history is complicated because the city changed hands many times. Spanish control, 1565 to 1763, almost 200 years. British control, 1763 to 1784. During this time, it was called Fort St. Mark. Spanish control again, 1784 to 1821. Finally, American control, 1821 present, when Spain sold Florida to the United States. Every time the flag changed, the fort changed names, but it never changed its strength. When Florida became part of the United States in 1821, the fort was renamed Fort Marion, after an American Revolutionary War hero. American soldiers used it as a military base until 1900. In 1924, it was declared a national monument. And in 1942, the US government gave it back its original Spanish name, Castillo de San Marcos. Today, St. Augustine is a beautiful city where you can walk through living history. The narrow streets are paved with coquina and old bricks. Buildings with Spanish-style architecture, balconies, courtyards, colorful walls, line the streets. You can visit the Castillo de San Marcos and walk through the same rooms Spanish soldiers walked through 300 years ago. Park rangers in period costumes demonstrate how to load and fire old cannons. The boom echoes across the bay just like it did centuries ago. You can even touch a block of coquina stone and feel its rough, shell-filled texture. You can visit the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park, where Menendez and his settlers first landed in 1565. Archaeologists have found evidence of the original settlement there, pottery shards, tools, even the remains of the first wooden fort. You can walk down St. George Street, a pedestrian-only road where shops and restaurants sit in buildings that are hundreds of years old. Street performers dress in colonial costumes. You can watch a blacksmith forge iron tools the old-fashioned way, just like they did in the 1600s. You can see the oldest wooden schoolhouse in the US, held together by wooden pegs and handmade nails. You can visit ancient cemeteries where Spanish settlers are buried. You can see the Cathedral Basilica, a beautiful church with parts dating back to the 1700s. And if you're lucky enough to visit in winter, you might see the Nights of Lights festival, when the entire city is decorated with millions of twinkling lights. The historic buildings glow, and St. Augustine looks like a fairy tale town. From a Spanish explorer's dream in 1565 to a wooden fort to the mighty Castillo made of magical shellstone to America's oldest continuously occupied city. St. Augustine is proof that history isn't just something you read about in books. It's something you can walk through, touch, and experience. So here's a question for you. If you could build a fort to protect something important, what would you use? Would you use wood, which is easy to get but can burn? Would you use regular stone, which is strong but can shatter? Or would you search for something special, like coquina, that could catch cannonballs and last for centuries? Pedro Menendez and the builders of St. Augustine chose coquina. And because of that choice, the Castillo de San Marcos still stands today, letting us peek into the past and see how people lived over 300 years ago. St. Augustine, America's oldest city, where Spanish explorers landed first, where the first Thanksgiving happened, where escaped slaves found freedom, where a fort made of seashells defeated every enemy, where narrow streets remember 459 years of stories. The next time someone asks, what's the oldest city in America? You'll know the answer. Not Jamestown, not Plymouth, but St. Augustine, Florida. The city that came first. The city that stood strong. The city where America's story truly begins. And that magical coquina stone? You can still see it today, filled with tiny shells, absorbing history instead of cannonballs, reminding us that sometimes the strongest things aren't what we expect. Sometimes the strongest things are built from millions of tiny pieces working together, just like the people who built this amazing city all those years ago.